for a minute because we're doing this campfire, and as much as it's fun to stand around a campfire, you don't hear a lot of people talk about that, do you? So I have a specific, I think it's in the bulletin, the story that we're going to read this morning. I titled it, and I think this is in keeping with how your pastor has titled his sermons. I titled this morning's sermon, "The Time Dad Killed the Cow." I think it's in there. If it's not in there, again, that's my fault. I was yard sailing yesterday and forgot to send my sermon title. So, but anyway, we're going with "The Time Dad Killed the Cow." And this is going to be the story of the prodigal son, and I'm sure some of you have heard it, maybe some of you haven't. Doesn't matter, because I'm going to read it to you. But it takes place in Luke chapter 15. So that's where we're going to go. Luke chapter 15. And this is the third in a story, basically of reconciliation, of people finding things that were lost. And the first one is about a woman with a coin. The second one is about a man with some sheep. And this third one is the story which has sort of come to be known as the story of the prodigal son. But there's so much more to it than that. So we're going to start reading in verse 11. So Luke chapter 15, verse 11. I'm reading out of a New Century Version, which is sort of a basic version, but I really like the way that it says it. So it says this: "Then Jesus said, a man had 2 sons. The younger son said to his father, 'Give me my share of the property.' So the father divided the property between his 2 sons, also known as an inheritance." If you're reading a King James Version or something along those lines, it'll probably call it an inheritance. And verse 13 says, "Then the younger son gathered up all that was his and traveled far away to another country. There he wasted his money in foolish living. After he had spent everything, a time came when there was no more food anywhere in the country, and the son was poor and hungry. So he got a job with one of the citizens there, and who sent the son into the fields to feed pigs. The son was so hungry that he wanted to eat the pods the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he realized what he was doing, he thought, 'All of my father's servants have plenty of food, but I am here almost dying with hunger. I will leave and return to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against God and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son, but let me be like one of your servants.' So the son left and went to his father. While the son was still a long way off, his father saw him, felt sorry for his son, and the father ran to him and hugged and kissed him. And the son said, 'Father, I have sinned against God and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Hurry, bring the best clothes and put them on him. Also put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. And get out the fatted calf and kill it so we can have a feast and celebrate. My son was dead, but now he is alive again. He was lost, but now he is found.' So they began to celebrate. The older son was in the field. And as he came closer to the house, he heard the sound of music and dancing. So he called one of his servants and asked what this all meant. And the servant said, 'Your brother has come back, and your father killed the fatted calf because your brother came home safely.' The older son was angry and would not go to the feast. So his father went out and begged him to come in. But the older son said to his father, 'I have served you like a slave for many years and have always obeyed your commands. But you never gave me even a young goat to have a feast with my friends. But your other son, who wasted all your money on prostitutes, comes home, and you kill the fatted calf for him?' And the father said to him, 'Son, you are always with me, and all I have is yours. We had to celebrate and be happy, because your brother was dead, but now he is alive. He was lost, but now he is found.'" Let's pray. God, we thank you that we can hear your words today, and I pray that you would encourage us in our hearts as we take a few minutes and consider what this means to us and to our life. I pray that we would just be open to hear from you, and that any of the barriers that we put up sometimes to sort of separate ourselves, that we would just take those down and we would hear your word and we would let it speak to our hearts and mean something to us today. And I thank you again for this opportunity, and I give you the glory in Jesus' name. Amen. This is a story now, if you're in your Bible, it may have a heading Something like the prodigal son, or the son returns home, or the lost son is found. And that's rightfully so. I think that that's obviously sort of the main part of the story. But really, as you read through this story, there's really three parts of the story, or three particular people that are involved. And as I was preparing for today, I was looking at these three different parts of the story and thinking that for a lot of us, we're at different parts of the story at different times. It's one thing, and a lot of times when people use this as a text for a sermon, they just want to focus on the idea of the prodigal son, the son that left, blew everything, wasted everything, came back home, and that's an important part of the story. But I think the three parts of the story can represent all of us at different moments and different times in our lives. Obviously, the first part is the prodigal son. We will talk about that for a little bit, but that's the first part, that's the main part. But the second part is just an amazing father. A father just full of love and grace and mercy, who, responds to his son in an amazing way. And the third part is the jealous brother, which is probably not the heading you're going to get put in your Bible, the story of the jealous brother. However, I do think that that is something that needs to be looked at, because it's there for a reason. It's part of this story, and I think it's something that all of us can struggle with sometimes in life. And so we're going to look at these three different parts, because I really do believe that in our life, each different part of this story can relate to where we are. I don't think we're always in these stages, because we know in life, you're not always where you once were, right? At one point you were somewhere else, at one point you did something else, at one point you knew something else, but now you know something different. Now you do something different. Now you're a different person and in a different place and in a different situation, in a different circumstance. So we might find ourselves in some of these situations. Maybe you'll relate specifically to one thing that I talk about this morning, or one of these. Or maybe you kind of feel like, I'm not really in any of those places right now, but I still want to use this to encourage, myself and those around me, because I think it's an encouraging story. So we're going to start out talking about the prodigal son. This is a fairly interesting story that takes place from his perspective. So he says to his father, I want my inheritance now. I've always thought of that as an interesting thing. Now, I've not received a super inheritance in my life, but I did have a grandfather who had a life insurance policy that, he helped me when he passed away. I was a beneficiary, so that was something. It wasn't exactly an inheritance, and certainly wasn't enough for me to live on for a long time, but it was enough, that I was able to honor my grandfather with that, and he really wanted to take care of me. But one of the things about inheritances that's funny is you usually only collect them when the person dies. That's the idea of an inheritance, is that when the father dies, the son gets the whatever. So the concept of the son coming to the father and saying, I want my inheritance now, is sort of on par with him saying, I wish you were dead. That's sort of the same thing, especially culturally. You look back, and culturally, it would have been a really bizarre thing for a son to say, I want my inheritance now. It would have almost been an insulting thing for him to say, because essentially what he was saying was, I would rather have the money than the relationship with you. I would rather have what's owed to me or what's coming to me than have the relationship with my own father. So the son asks for it. This is really an act of selfishness. And again, I said that at different points in our life, we really relate or kind of fit into the categories of some of the people in this story. And this is a category that I think a lot of us have fit into at different times, where we react or act in selfish ways. I'm not saying that to, shame anyone. I'm just saying that if you're human... Am I the only one who hears that? Okay. But if you're a human in life, sometimes we have a tendency to act selfishly, right? You don't have to nod. You don't have to point to the person next to you or anything like that. We can just be honest and say that sometimes in my life, instead of being selfless, I become selfish. And we have those tendencies sometimes because we're us. We want to take care of us first. We want to think about ourselves first. We want to think about what we're going through first. But so here we have the prodigal son. Starts out in a selfish way, and as things start to spiral out of control, he doesn't just have selfishness, but he becomes very self-centered. He starts to think about how I have nothing and I have nothing going on. And this is really the results of selfishness. Because if you close yourself in with selfishness, if you only ever take care of yourself, eventually you're going to run out. You can't be selfish forever. You're going to run out of whatever it is that you're holding on to. If nothing else, you're just going to not have people around you. And we see at one point, the only things he had around him were some pigs in a field. He was selfish to the point where all of the people who he thought cared about him had run away. They weren't with him anymore. And all of the people who actually did care about him were nowhere to be found because he had run away. He'd pushed them away. Selfishness leads to self-centeredness. And ultimately leads to a place where you can't be self-centered and get to a place where you're satisfied. There's no satisfaction in selfishness. It's going to take something else. It's going to take giving. We know the statements, it's better to give than to receive. That kind of thing. What does that really mean? What it means is that if all we're doing is receiving all the time, we're not going to be appreciative, we're not going to be thankful. All of that selfishness is going to come back. But when we start to give to people around us, when we start to get involved with what's going on in our communities and what's going on in our churches, when we start to become involved in life, we can see that we, instead of running out and never being satisfied, we become satisfied. There's a story of Jesus in the Bible where he meets a woman at the well. And he has sent the disciples away. And he says to the disciples, go get me some food. That's why he sent them away. He said, go get me some food. The disciples leave and Jesus is at this well and the woman comes to the well and there's this whole thing that takes place and Jesus tells her that he can be the, if she thirsts of what he gives her, she'll never be thirsty again. And he tells her this whole story. And he's really giving to her, he's really helping her, he's accepting her because she's been through some things. She's had 5 marriages, had a lot of failures, had a lot of struggles, and Jesus just accepts her and loves her because that's who he is, because he's just loving and accepting, and he's giving to her. And when the disciples come back, Jesus says, I have food you didn't know about, because all of a sudden he was satisfied. He sent them away and they were going to get food for him, but when they came back, he said, I have satisfaction. That's because he was giving into other people's lives. And truthfully, if we start giving into people's lives, and we start helping people who are in need, and we start helping people who are hurting, and we start loving people who are hurt and broken, all of a sudden, all of the selfishness becomes selflessness. And instead of being unsatisfied in life, we find satisfaction. Because we're giving of ourselves. We even following the example of Jesus where he gives of himself. Part of the challenge, of course, with that is that it's easy for us, and we're going to talk about this a little bit with the brother, it's easy for us to judge selfishness in other people. It's easy for us to say, well, look at how selfish they are. They don't want to help, or they don't want to get involved, or they don't want to give, or they don't want to do this. I want to challenge you today that one of the things, instead of just judging selfishness, because truthfully we all can be selfish, you don't have to shake your head, I just know it. We can be selfish sometimes, we can be more concerned with us than with other people. But instead of judging selfishness, why don't we take time to celebrate selflessness? When people do give of themselves, let's celebrate it. When people go out of their way to help people and to encourage people and just be there. Sometimes it's not about what you're doing. Sometimes it's just about the fact that you're there. You just show up. I've been in situations where I knew just the fact that I showed up meant something. So celebrate selflessness. So here's the son. He's selfish. He says, give me all the money. I just wish you were dead and gone. I want my inheritance now. He goes and he lives it up and he wastes all his money. I'm sure none of you have ever wasted any money. You probably can't relate to that. He wastes all his money. He runs out of money. He finds himself in this pit with the pigs, and he's wishing he was eating the pig food. That's pretty rough, right? I've never wished that I could eat anything an animal eats like that. So I've been to a lot of farms. I want to eat food that's cooked on the stove. But he lives this selfish life, he crashes, he becomes broken to the point where he's willing to eat the pig's food, to the point where he's willing to swallow his pride and go back to the Father. But he's got this sort of feeling that the father is going to hate him. The father's going to hold this against him. That the father's going to say, no, I don't want you anymore. So he works out a plan. He says, I'm going to be I'll go to my father and I'll say, you don't have to accept me as your son, just accept me as a servant. Just accept me as someone that serves, because if nothing else, I know I'll have a warm bed to sleep in. And if nothing else, I know I'll have a house to live in, and I'll have food on the table, and there'll be people around me. Just accept me as a servant. That's his plan. He's going to go home and he's going to beg to be a servant in his father's house. You're pretty broken at that point when you think even your parents don't want you, right? I've talked with people, I work with people who have poor relationships with their parents and have difficult struggles. It's not a good place to be in when you think the best your parents would do is make you a servant. That's the best he was hoping for. He couldn't think even beyond that. He was just hoping he could somehow just serve. Maybe he'll just accept me as a servant. Back in my own house. This is where he was. He was broken. And I do think that that's a place that we all sometimes get to. Where we just have broke. We're just not working right anymore. And at that point, he finally makes a good decision. He didn't understand it all. He didn't know what he was going to do exactly. But he made the decision, I'm going to go home. I'm going to go home. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what it's going to be like, but I'm going to go home. I'm going to go back to my father. Maybe I'll just be a servant, or maybe he'll throw me out, or I don't know what's going to happen, but I've got to go home and see what happens. So he starts on the journey home, and that kind of leads us to the second person in the story, the second player of this scenario, and that's the father. Now there's two examples here. Ultimately, the father is a picture of God. It shows us that there are moments, where we become selfish, and moments where we think about ourselves, and moments where our focus is not on anything but just pleasing ourselves and living for ourselves and doing it all for us. And God gives us this story as an example to say that when we decide that we're going to turn to Him, He still loves us. He's not thrown off. He doesn't hate us. He doesn't throw us away because of our selfishness. But He loves us and He cares for us. And He has grace and mercy for us, even through our selfishness. Aren't you glad for that? That even though there's times where we're selfish, He's still going to love us and He's still going to care for us. Even though there's times where we waste things and we ruin things and we make mistakes and we fail, He still just loves us. So this is a great example of God, this Father who sees the Son and comes running. I'm going to talk about that a little bit. But this is an example of God. But I think this is also a great example for us. Because we have people in our lives, maybe family members or friends or just people we know. Maybe they're not quite as hurtful as the Son was to the Father. Maybe they're not saying, I wish you were dead. Maybe they are saying that. I don't know. But for us, there are people in our life who hurt us and people in our life who can harm us. And through this, we see this Father give such great grace and such great mercy to a son who has really hurt him, who has really not treated him well, who turned his back on him, who ran away. This is an amazing, amazing picture of God. But it's also a great example for us. What we can do, how we can respond to people. So here we see, what does the Father do? Well, there's one thing that He does at the beginning, and this is a hard one. In fact, this is one of the most difficult things in the whole story, I think, for me, probably for you too, and that is this. He loved His Son enough to let Him make the bad decision. He loved Him, He cared about Him, He wanted Him. And when the Son said, I want my inheritance, the Father said, okay. I'm sure He knew it was a bad decision. Sometimes as parents, you know bad decisions when you see them. I'm sure He knew that this isn't going to turn out good. This isn't what He should do. But if I hold back from Him, He's just going to push me further and further and further away. There's going to be resentment, there's going to be hate, there's going to be anger. He already wishes I was dead. So I'm going to give Him the freedom. And I think this is a picture of God and His love for us, because God is not forcing our hand He's not making you do good, but he loves you, cares about you, has the plan and the purpose. And here we see he gives him the freedom. He gives him the choice. And this is really the essence of love. We can't make people love us, can we? It'd be nice if we could. You're going to love me. But what we do is we live as who we are, but it gives people the opportunity. True love is a choice that we make. I heard it said one time, I don't even know where it came from, in regards to things like marriage. You choose the one you love, and you love the one you choose. Love is something that we choose to do, and this father loved his son enough that he said, my son needs to make the decision to choose. And the son made the bad decision, and he went, but just because he went didn't mean that the father gave up loving on the son. And the story gives the impression that he sort of watched and waited, because it says he sees him in a long distance off. He sees him a long way. I tell this to people a lot. God, as soon as we turn our eyes to him, he sees us. As soon as we turn to him, he sees us. He's not hiding from us. He's not running from us. He sees us even when we're a long ways off. And for some people, sometimes we want people to just, we want them to just start coming to church, never miss a Sunday, volunteer, pay your tithes, do all the things you're supposed to do. When God sees us, even as Scripture says, with a grain of mustard seed of faith, God responds to that. Just a mustard seed. It doesn't have to be massive, overwhelming faith. And here we see the father watching and waiting, and even when the son was really far away, the father runs to him. And I love this idea. I love when my kids get home from school. Actually, sometimes I get home from work a little bit after they've got home from school. And particularly I have a daughter named Kalia who just runs and jumps into my arms, and she just hangs off of me. She just hangs off my shoulders. I can let go, and I can shake, and she won't come off. She's just glued to me. The father does this to the boy. He runs to him, and he tackles him, basically, so excited to see him. And the boy doesn't know what to do, so he still follows through with his plan. I'm sorry, if I could just be a servant in your house. I've sinned against you. I've sinned against God. Just make me a servant. And the father doesn't react at all like the boy was expecting. The father reacts with love and with grace. That's a lesson that I think we can learn as a church sometimes. Because people expect churches to be harsh. I run into people all the time who expect me, because I speak at churches and because I've taught at Bible schools, they expect me to be hard on them. They apologize for things. Sorry to say that. The example we have here of the father who loved his child, which is an example of God, which is an example that we can follow, is not one that's full of judgment, but it's one that's full of love and grace. That's the example we're supposed to follow, is the example that says, even if you hurt me, even if you harm me, even if you do bad, I'm going to run to you. Isn't that what the whole story of salvation is? While we were still sinners, he came for us. So here we see this story of the father running with excitement, with love. And I want you to think about these things that he does. This is what the father does. Number one, he runs to him. Number two, he hugs and he kisses him. Number three, he gives him the best, newest clothes. He puts a ring on his finger. He gives him brand new sandals. He kills the fatted calf, the best one, and he throws a feast. That's the kind of celebration he had for a son that turned his back and walked away. For a son who basically said, I wish you were dead. That's the kind of celebration he had. And as a picture of God, this is amazing. He runs to us. He hugs and kisses us. That's a form of intimacy, right? You don't do that with just anyone. Well, I hope you don't do that with just anyone. So the father runs and hugs and kisses. Breaks that barrier immediately. Yeah, you hurt me, but you're still mine. Yeah, you left, but I still care about you. I still love you. I still want to hold you. Puts on the best clothes. Gives him a brand new ring. Put on his finger. Puts sandals on his feet. Throws a celebration and kills the fatted calf, the one with the best brisket. The one with the best ribs. I have a little bit of a rib addiction. I work in Maine, and I work out of sometimes Holton, but mostly Presque Isle and Caribou. And there's a rib truck that goes around Presque Isle and Caribou, and I've started following them on Facebook so I know which parking lot they're parked in. So every Wednesday I get a notification, the rib truck's in Caribou today, and I start looking in my wallet. How much can I afford to spend today? This week it was in 3 places that I was, and I didn't buy ribs once. I showed so much restraint, and now I have like $15 in my wallet, and I'm wondering why. Like I probably could have spent that on the ribs. The fatted calf gives him the best stuff. Man, I love this picture of God. But really, even more than just the picture of God, I want that to be me with people in this world. Embrace them, even in their failures, even in their mistakes. Take care of them. Give them the best clothes. Help them. Put new shoes on their feet. Celebrate them. Because a lot of people in life don't really feel celebrated. Don't feel like they matter. Maybe you feel like that. I'll tell you today, you matter. This is an example of God. He wants to just embrace us and take care of us and love us. He's not holding who we are against us. He's not running away from us just because we've had failures, just because we make mistakes. He cares about who we are. Celebrates us. Now we get to the third part of the story. This is a difficult one. This is the brother. Let me turn that like that so I can see a little better. This is the jealous brother. See, we have the story of the selfish brother who ran away and messed everything up, wasted all his money, is accused. Obviously this is a parable. We don't know. It's not. The jealous brother says he wasted it all on frivolous living, and New Century Version says he wasted it on prostitutes. It's not outlined exactly, but clearly he was not wise with his money. But there's redemption, and don't we love redemption stories? He was gone, but now he's back, and now he's found. But the story of the jealous brother is totally different. And sometimes I'm the jealous brother. The jealous brother is really self-righteous. This is probably our biggest struggle. Because see, when you get to the point where you've thrown everything away and you become broken, you're thinking, something has to change. I'll go back to my father. I'll figure something out. I'll become a servant. Whatever I have to do. And we can appreciate that and we can understand that. But the jealous brother, he never felt like he did anything wrong. I'm not as bad as my brother. I stayed here the whole time. I worked hard the whole time. I did everything my father asked me to do. Why should he get a celebration when I've been the one here the whole time? He gets self-righteous. He starts judging him. He wasted everything. Tells his father, he's such a waste. Wasted it all on women. Why are you celebrating him? You never gave me anything. I was here the whole time. And he gets jealous in his heart. He deals with this jealousy where he's throwing his own brother who should be celebrated. He recovered. He came back home. He didn't die. He's there for you to have in your life again. And now all of a sudden, instead of celebrating with his father and with the whole household, he's jealous and he's angry and he's upset because he says, I was here the whole time. What about me? See, sometimes we become selfish, and it's not just because we left to look after ourselves. Sometimes selfishness shows up in different ways, in different situations. He starts judging him, and the father says something pretty remarkable to the jealous brother. He says, don't you know that everything I have, all that I have, was yours? Don't you know that? Everything I have was yours. You could have had it at any time. I wasn't holding anything back. So I got 3 lessons for us today. This is it. That's all we got left. Is that okay? I don't even know. I haven't checked what time it is. Oh, we're doing pretty good. We're just right about on schedule. So I got this much. I don't have anything written after that. 3 things. Because I think sometimes we're the son, and sometimes we're the father, and sometimes we're the brother. So I want to encourage you today, and maybe you kind of don't feel like you fit into any of these, but probably you do. If you don't think you do, you might be a little bit of one of them. I'm not going to tell you which one. You just have to listen. But really what I want to give these to you for today is not so you can say, wow, that was great, but so that you can leave here. And sometime maybe this week you'll see some of this and you'll know what to do. And you'll be able to respond really with love and grace. But first and foremost, if you're feeling like the son, like you ran away, you can come home. God loves us. He cares about us. He's not pushing us away. He's not thrown off by our failures or by our mistakes or by the things that we've done wrong. He loves us. He loves you. That's who God is. This story is here for a reason, and it's to say that even when we make the choice to run away, He still loves us. He still wants us, and He still cares about us. So you can come home, there's love, and there's grace. I know enough of people in this church now to know that if that's where you find yourself, you can come here and there'll be people who will love you, people who will help you, people who will encourage you. Yeah, we make mistakes, but God has such great love and grace for us. Maybe you're in the place of being the father today, where someone has hurt you, someone has pushed you away, someone has caused you harm. Maybe that's where you feel like you are. Be patient. Be patient. Patience is difficult when someone is in that situation. But the Father, the example we have of the Father is that He was patient, but He was ready. I feel like He knew what He was going to do as soon as the son came home, because He immediately said, kill the calf. Why hadn't they killed the calf before? He immediately said, put on the new clothes. He had the clothes ready. Put on the new sandals. Put on the ring. He had the things ready. Be ready, because there's people in your life who may have hurt you and may have harmed you. There's people that you know who maybe they're far away right now, but be ready. Know what you're going to do when they come back. Be ready to embrace them. Hold on to them. Say, I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to love you. Or maybe you're the brother. Maybe you're feeling jealous. Maybe you're feeling slighted. Maybe you're feeling like, why is God blessing them so much? Why is this happening? That's not really what's going on. The brother had it the whole time. It was always his. Really what the brother missed out on was one simple thing: thankfulness. Be thankful. Be thankful for what you have. Be thankful for what's been given to you. Live in thankfulness. Recognize what you have, what you've been blessed with, what you've been surrounded by. Yeah, it might not be much, but believe me, there's people who are worse. There's people who wish they had what you have. There's people who wish they had a place like this to come and worship in. There's people who wish they had a place like this that they could surround themselves with people who would encourage them and love them and take care of them. So you don't have to live in jealousy. You can be thankful. I think all of us deal with these different things in our life. Sometimes we're the ones that run away. Sometimes we're the ones that get hurt. Sometimes we're the ones who feel a little jealous. How come I didn't get that? I hope this morning that you can take these things and you can say, you know what? I know that there's love and grace. I know that God cares for me. I'm going to be patient and ready, and I'm going to care for the people who've hurt me. And I'm going to be thankful for what I have. Thankful for what I've been blessed with. Why don't we stand together this morning?